I think in crisis, the stories are devastating, and they somehow, the ones that have hope are life-giving. And I think it comes down to where is the hope? I read a very interesting statistic yesterday that came from Kantar Futures,
Okay.
one of the sources I use for strategy for Chick-fil-A. And anger has replaced hope as a top 5 emotion for Americans.
Wow. And
Anger has replaced hope.
and what do you think's going on there?
Gosh, I think that there's so much that's unknown. And I think as humans, we have a hard time with that. I
Is
think
it that we want
especially
to blame someone, so that's why we lean into the anger, or is it anger with ourselves, or?
that, I don't know. I think we have a desire to control, to
Mm,
plan. You know, I talked about how I love planning and I
yeah.
love crafting goals. My calendar is blank. I mean, it says May,
But
and
was
then
it
it's blank.
filled up the months before May?
Heck yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
now it's
Color
just,
coded, like
yeah.
everything, like here we go. How many weekends we have downtime, what we fill our time with, all that. It was beautiful, beautiful. But there's a lack of control. And I think a lot of times we're really uncomfortable with that lack of control. And so I think part of that is a control
Yeah.
situation. And then some of it is maybe, yeah, we do want to figure out who's wrong or how do we fix this? And we don't have all of those answers.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's interesting that the emotion that has replaced hope is anger. And
Yeah.
so when we think about stories and where there is hope, it's like we can settle. But when we don't have a clear hope, there's anxiety and
Yeah.
stress, and then it turns to fear and anger. We just need to like get that
Yeah.
emotion out. So I just found that really fascinating and insightful to think about for ourselves. Like, where am I putting my hope? And is that
Yeah.
where I need to be putting it?
So I think what I'm hearing is we're feeling out of control and we're attaching to things that may or may not help us.
Hmm.
So how do we sort of rest in the idea that we don't have to know the answer, we can be uncertain, and we're
Hmm.
not in control?
Yes. Well, a coach for me, her name's Jen Bowie, and she's amazing. She has really taught me to pay attention to the tension.
Mm,
And so when we feel that tension inside, when we feel the anxiety, the anger, the frustration, wherever that tension is, pay attention and ask, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And what am I believing?
yeah.
Because those three are so intertwined, and our beliefs are going to drive our thoughts, which will then impact our feelings.
Yeah.
And when we can identify and articulate, hey, I'm feeling anxious, I'm thinking I have no control, and I'm believing that, fill in the blank for what the
Mm-hmm.
belief would be behind it, then that gives us actual it gives us control in a sense. It gives us some power over the subconscious that's going on in our
Mm-hmm.
minds. And over time, you talked about it in the beginning, over time, our brain is malleable enough that we can set new thought processes and lines of thinking in our brains. And so it gives us the chance to be able to rewire our minds
Yeah.
into things that are true and into thoughts that are helping us go in the direction that
Mm.
we want to go.
And would you tie that into habits in any particular way, or
100%.
new habits?
Yeah, we don't have as humans a whole lot of capacity for habit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for discipline, we have a lot of
Mm.
capacity for habit. And
Okay.
so I have a number of friends, because a really important ritual or habit for me is my morning routine. And
Mm.
friends will say, oh, Elizabeth, you're so disciplined. I go, not necessarily. I'm very habitual. And I turn what was a conscious choice into a subconscious
Yeah.
habit.
Which probably
And
was very
so
difficult for a while, but then became easier over time.
totally. I started with waking up 10 minutes earlier, and then 15 minutes earlier, and giving
Mm.
myself the motivation of a cup of coffee that's basically a donut in a
Yeah.
cup because there's so much cream and sugar in it. But over time, it becomes where you have this entire habit built in. And so our thoughts, our beliefs, our habits,
Yeah.
all of that is tied together.
Yeah. And then your living example, your story then inspires others to do that. Hey, they could do the same thing.
Yeah. I recommend it. I think our habits determine our direction in
Yeah.
many ways. Like our yeses and nos each day are determining where we ultimately will go. We just sometimes don't think that my decision today is that powerful. And I'll give you a super simple example. But a
Yeah.
friend of mine said the other day, you know, if you read 1 page a day, you can read a book a year.
Yeah.
I was like, really? He said, yeah. Most books are probably around 300 pages. If you read 1 page a day, you get a book a year. He said, so my goal is 20 pages a day because I'm going to read 20 books a year.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that breaks it down into something that's so bite-sized and
Mm-hmm.
doable. And when we do that with our physical health, when we do that with our finances, when we do that with our careers, whatever that is, when we break it down into something that we can say yes to today, then we ultimately end up getting to where we want to
Yeah.
go. But it's not as overwhelming. It's
Yeah.
more than something we can handle.
Yeah. And that was similar to how I wrote my first book for freelancers. It was an hour a day, and I just did
Really?
that, and eventually it was done. You know.
I love that.
Yeah. So, and then I didn't have a timeline. It was just that cadence, you know, and then when it was done, it was done. And then I moved to the next stage, and the whole process took me about 18 months. So.